Hey, everyone. My name's Helen. I'm a partner engineer on Slack's platform team. And what that means is that I work with partners every single day to help them create and refine their experiences for Slack. Though I mostly work with partners to create third-party integrations, I'm certainly no stranger to the internal integrations world as well. There's a lot of delight in being able to streamline your own workflows and connect services together, but it can often be cumbersome to build up the infrastructure that support these apps, and that's where Lambda really shines. So today, I'll be walking through the process of building my very own Slack app in Lambda, starting with a brief introduction into what Lambda is. Then we'll look into how to trigger these functions through Slack. And finally, we'll build out a small utility function, which is a / command that'll randomly choose a winner out of all the members in a Slack channel. So first things first, what is Lambda? Well, in essence, Lambda is just a platform to build serverless functions on AWS. It's really streamlined the process of creating smaller, on-demand applications that are responsive to events. And we at Slack have continued to partner with AWS over the years to create content as well as to create blueprints that make the process of creating these Lambda functions even easier. And there's a lot of out-of-the-samples that you can start off with that are actually available through AWS. I'll show you soon. But we're going to be creating our own from scratch today. So Lambda functions will only run when they're invoked, and you're really paying for them on a per-use basis. And they support a variety of different languages. We'll be using Node.js today, but you can also use Lambda functions through Go, Python, and lots of other things. So Lambda functions are actually triggered through invocation hooks, and there's quite a variety of different triggers. If you're an engineer or an ops person, you might want to trigger them through other events that are happening in AWS. For example, if there's a CloudWatch event that occurs, or if an object is created in S3. If you're into playing with IoT or things like Alexa, you can connect those as triggers as well. But for us, we're going to be working with API Gateway today as a trigger for our Lambda function. And I think that's probably one of the most popular methods to actually start these off. So AWS Gateway is a way to create powerful APIs for your application. You can create, publish, and manage your endpoints. But we're just going to be setting up one single endpoint today to field requests from Slack, from curl, or essentially it'll just be a public URL that you can hit, and everything about those requests will then be proxied over to our Lambda function. So with that, let's switch over to the demo, and we can show you how to create one of those. Cool. So here you just see my AWS dashboard, and I'm going to go into Lambda itself. So right here, you can just create a new function. And as you can see here, there's a lot of blueprints that you can use to kick off a Lambda function as a template. So if you search for Slack here, you can actually see that there's quite a few Slack examples out there already for things like a / command or things like posting a CloudWatch event or alarm into Slack. But we're going to be authoring ours from scratch. So I'll just give this a simple name. I'll call it Slack-Spec. Leave it at node 6, and then choose an existing role. I'm going to be creating a custom role here. And roles are essentially a way to define the permissions that this Lambda function has. It's taking a little bit of time to load. But essentially, because our Lambda function isn't going to be doing very much in terms of connecting with other AWS services, so I'm going to zoom in here. We're just going to allow that and set its role to sort of basic Lambda execution. And there we have it. We've created that function. So now, if you scroll down, you'll see that there's actually a CLI that's available to you from right within the browser. And you can use this to start creating your function. But first, let's actually set up our API Gateway trigger. So you go up here, click API Gateway, and then you can start configuring that trigger. By doing this just through Lambda, what you're creating is called like a proxy integration type for API Gateway. And what that means is it's just the most simple way to create that endpoint. It's going to accept really any request that you're throwing at it, no matter which HTTP method it is. So let's give ours a name. We'll create a new one. I'm going to call this Slack-Spec as well. leave the deployment stage at prod. And we're actually going to configure this as the security as open, just so that it receives every single request. So now we've created that. We can save our changes. Awesome. And we can start adding in our code. So you'll see here that Lambda has already given you some starter code. You can see that a Lambda function will take in some sort of event. This is essentially all of the data around that request that's being proxied in, and will do some sort of work here and pass back a callback. But the thing about API Gateway is it's actually expecting in the callback a sort of HTTP response object, complete with status codes and with the response body. So we'll actually have to change this up quite a bit. And for save time, oh my God, have a snippet. Okay, we're just going to construct a response body. We're going to make that an object with sort of a text as hello world, and then we're actually going to echo back that entire event that's being sent in currently. Then we'll construct the whole response itself, setting the status code to 200, and then stringifying that whole response body. And we save that. That's it. The Lambda function's live. So let's try to hit that Lambda function now. Wait, actually, let me go get the invoke URL. So that's on the API gateway level, and you can grab that just from here. So if you go into curl, you can just make a simple GET request to that. I'm going to pipe that into JQ so we can see the response a bit more clearly. And as you can see, you get that hello world text back along with all of that input. So there's a lot here, which means you can do potentially a lot with that Lambda function. For instance, you get the resource, the path, the HTTP method, all of the headers that are involved. And if we had added anything to that request body or to the query string parameters, it would be here as well. Cool. So now we know that that works. Let's actually try to hit this Lambda function through Slack. So to do that, we have to, of course, create our Slack app. I'm going to name that Slack-Spec as well and add that to my development workspace. Okay, and you can actually hit Lambda functions through a lot of different parts of the Slack API. For example, you can connect a button press to a Lambda function. You can configure your Events API subscriptions with the invoke URL so that, for instance, if a new emoji is added to your team, a Lambda function gets called. But today, we're just going to stick with the humble / command. So we'll create a new command. Our first one, I just wanted it to be something simple to prove that it works, so I'm going to call it echo. And what this will do is it'll just echo back whatever the user types in as a text after the / command. And then for the request URL, you can use that same invoke URL from API Gateway as well. I give it a description. And I'll save that. OK. And now we have to install this app onto the team. Sorry. Bear with me, the Wi-Fi is a little bit slow. OK. So now I can install that app onto the workspace. And after you install an app onto your workspace as a single team app, you'll get the OAuth access token here. I'm just going to copy that in and make it an environment variable in our Lambda function. While we don't explicitly need the access token for our echo command, we'll need it a bit later on as we make calls to the Slack API. And the other piece that we'll need from the Slack settings is the verification token. So with every single / command, or actually with any outgoing request that we make from Slack to your app, we want to send along this verification token so you can verify that the request is indeed coming from Slack and not coming from some third party or some malicious entity. And we give you that verification token here. And you should treat this token just as securely as you're treating the access token. Okay. So now that we have that saved, we can start reconfiguring our handler to actually respond in a Slacky way. But actually, we first should figure out what exactly that slash command sends over to your app. So now let's switch back to the slides so we can investigate that. Okay, so what you can see here is what a slash command payload contains. We give you all the information we can about that slash command request. So for instance, we give you that verification token, information on the team and the channel that the slash command occurred in, as well as the user who triggered it. Importantly, we also show you which command was called, because each Slack app can contain up to 5 slash commands, as well as the text that the user typed in afterwards. So this is all well and good, but the thing to also note is that this is being sent over to your app as a form URL encoded request. So what does this look like after it goes through API Gateway and into Lambda? It looks something like this. Now, if you remember from that curl request, there's a whole lot of different things that are returned back. But what we really care about here is the body of the request. And all of those parameters are being sent in right there. And this looks a little bit messy, but we can definitely clean that up and parse that ourselves. So now let's switch back into the code. And we can start modifying this. The first thing we'll want to do is to actually use the query string, make that a little bit prettier, module, so that we can start parsing that body into something that we can really work with. Okay, and next I'm just going to delete all of this for simplicity's sake. We can start by creating a shell of a response body that we will start to return. So what that needs is a status code, which we'll set to null for now, as well as a body, which we're just going to set to an empty string. Okay, and now we can create a variable called params that will contain all of our event body in a parsed way so that we can start asking it for the specific command or the user. And since that's all in the event body, that's what I'll pass in here. Okay, great. Now before we do anything else, sorry, I get very nervous live coding, so I know all of you just saw like 10 typos within one line, but it's okay. I got them all, I think. Okay, the first thing to do is actually check that verification token that we saved as an environment variable. So we'll do that by seeing if what we've saved is equivalent to the token that we have passed back in to us. And if it's not the same, that means this request is a little bit suspicious. So we'll, or at the very least, it's unauthorized. So we're going to set the status code then to 401. And we'll set the response body to a simple unauthorized. Great. And then we can just return back from there with the callback. Cool. So that takes care of checking for the verification token. And if it did go through this, then that means we can just return a 200 and set the response body to actually be equal to the text that we have in params, because if you remember, that's basically the text that the user has typed in after the command. Okay, so we can save all of that. And now if we go to Slack, we should be able to find that echo command and say something to it. Something is wrong. Okay. Oh, duh, I didn't return it. All right. So now let's try that again. And you have hi spec. That's exactly what I typed in before. I'm really embarrassed that there was clapping for that small feature, but we're going to go and take that a little bit further. Okay, and we're going to make that sort of roulette, picking a random winner feature that we talked about before. So in order to do that, we'll need to add a bit more scope to our app, and we'll need to create a new API call method. And we need to really start to retrieve that conversation member information. So we have a method for that. It's conversations.members, and it's pretty straightforward. When you call that with by the way, the request up there is wrong, and I'm just going to call attention to that. You'll want to send in the access token and the channel ID, and it'll return back to you the list of the members that are in that channel. And that's all we really need for this, right? So now let's go back to the code. And we can start configuring our app for that. So the first thing we need to do is to call conversations.members. But conversations.members will actually require some scope. Because if you remember for our app right now, all it really knows is the / command. So we'll need to give it some new permission scope. And then the ones we're looking for are channels read, which will give you information about public channels on the team. And why don't we go ahead and add groups, :read as well, which will give you information about private channels on that team. So we'll save that. And you can see, as soon as I save the permission scopes, Slack recognized that, hey, you added new scopes to this app, so you need to reinstall it before any of the tokens take the new scopes into effect. So we can just click that, authorize it, and now we're back. And we'll also want to add that new / command in as well. So I'll create a new command. I'll call it random winner. I'll use the same request URL that I did before. Let me copy that in from Lambda. I'll save it. Oh, short description, right. Picks a random winner. Save that. And now we have two / commands on our app. So now all we have to do is go ahead and implement that. For timing reasons, I am just going to paste that in here, and don't worry, I'll walk you through what I did. So before, when we only had that one / command, it was really easy for us to just set the body of the request to exactly that text and return it back, and we didn't have to check for the exact command itself. But now we can check for if it's echo, we'll do that, and otherwise we can start picking the random winner and assume it's the other command. So first things first, we have that URL that we're going to make that request to. So it's conversation.members. We're going to pass in a token as well as that channel ID. Sorry, I have trouble scrolling back without going back on the page. That's how zoomed in I am. And then we'll just go ahead and make that request itself. So we're just going to be using the HTTPS module for this because we're only making one GET request, so there's no sense in importing something like the request library. But if that is something that you're interested in, you can certainly do that as well. Just know that in Lambda, you have to upload all of these modules yourself if you're using something that's not off the shelf. Okay, so once you make that request, at the end, once you receive all the data, you'll just parse that response body into result, and then for that members array, we're just going to go ahead and pick a random member from it. So we're multiplying random by the length of that array and then doing floor. And then you should be able to get that winner user ID right within this variable. All right, so let's save all of that. and test that in here. Access token, right. Yeah. Oh, I see what I did. Thank you. Clicking. OK. That totally makes sense why that didn't work. Let's try that again. Great. And you're able to pick a random winner from that channel. It's pretty simple, but when you run this over and over again, you can get different people. Randomness does work this way, where it doesn't always pick a different person each time. Oh my God. OK. Tomomi is a very lucky person, so this makes sense. But it's fine. I'm over time right now, so we'll just leave this be. You saw my math. It's good. Thank you.